Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I invite you to listen to a story titled The Seventh Anniversary. My husband handed me divorce papers as an anniversary gift. Unexpectedly, I just chuckled. Tomorrow, I will give your entire family an even bigger surprise. The light from the crystal chandeliers of the city's most exclusive Michelin-starred restaurant cascaded down, creating shimmering halos on my pearl-white silk slip dress. A melodic jazz tune drifted from the stage, blending with the soft clinking of wine glasses, orchestrating a symphony of luxury and romance. I sat across from Ryan, the man I had called my husband for the past 7 years. Today was our 7th wedding anniversary, a milestone I once thought would be etched in gold. I had booked this VIP private dining room a month in advance. I handpicked every dish, every bottle of wine, everything he loved most. I wanted it to be a special evening, a night to reignite the love that seemed to have cooled under the relentless grind of our daily lives. 7 years, a quarter of my youth, I had dedicated to him and his family. I had given up a promising career to become the quintessential supportive wife, a full-time homemaker, so he could focus entirely on building his empire. Apex Holdings had grown from a scrappy little startup into a heavy hitter in the real estate development market. And Ryan, a guy who once had nothing to his name, had transformed into an all-powerful CEO, a paragon of success admired by many. I was proud of him and content in my quiet sacrifices. I always believed that behind his massive success was a significant portion of my unseen labor. "Drink up. You look beautiful tonight," Ryan said. His voice was warm and deep. His gaze? It was a look I hadn't seen in a very long time. My heart fluttered. Maybe I had been worrying for nothing. Maybe his love for me was still alive, just buried under corporate pressure. I smiled, raised my glass, and clinked it against his. "Thank you. Happy 7th anniversary." We enjoyed our dinner together, bathed in the smooth jazz. He told me about the company's grand expansion plans, the massive contracts about to be signed. I listened, nodding, occasionally pushing the best cuts of Wagyu steak onto his plate. Everything felt perfect, just like the early days of our romance. After dinner, Ryan signaled the waiter, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "I have a special gift for you for our anniversary." Anticipation flared in my chest. It had been a long time since he bought me a gift. He reached into his expensive crocodile leather briefcase and pulled out a box wrapped in elegant silver paper. I opened it with genuine excitement, but inside wasn't jewelry or a designer accessory, it was a gold-plated fountain pen. I was slightly taken aback but still smiled. "Thank you, honey. It's a beautiful pen. It's not just for looking at," Ryan said. The smile on his lips twisted into something unfamiliar. "It's for signing." With that, he reached into his briefcase again, pulled out a stack of crisp, letter-sized papers, and placed them squarely on the table in front of me. "Here is your real gift. Take a look." I picked up the papers with slightly trembling hands. The first line that caught my eye was printed in bold, undeniable letters: "Petition for dissolution of marriage." It felt like an invisible hand had crushed my heart. All the surrounding sounds faded away. The jazz music, the laughter, the chatter, it all vanished. All that remained was a ringing in my ears and the frantic pounding of my heart against my ribs. I flipped through the pages. They were ice cold. The letters danced mockingly before my eyes. A property settlement agreement. He had transferred all our joint assets company stock, houses, cars into his sole name. I didn't even know when he managed to do it. I was allocated a pathetic lump sum alimony, barely enough to rent a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, let alone survive. And on the very last page was his signature, decisive and cold, signed in different ink. He had prepared everything well in advance. I looked up at the man sitting across from me. The warm smile on his face was gone, replaced by a cold, arrogant expression I had never seen before. "Surprised, Kate?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery, as if he were granting me the ultimate mercy. So, this was his anniversary gift. A perfectly executed play, a sweet stab in the back. 7 years of my youth, 7 years of sacrifice in exchange for this brazen betrayal. A sharp pain pierced my chest. But strangely enough, I didn't cry. Not a single tear fell. Perhaps when pain crosses a certain threshold, it metamorphoses into something entirely different. "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce you," Ryan continued, as if what had just happened wasn't cruel enough. "There's someone else. Her name is Chloe. She's the daughter of Victor Sterling, the chairman of Pinnacle Group, our biggest strategic partner. She's carrying my child, and I need to give her the status she deserves. You understand, right? So that was it. He hadn't just betrayed me. He needed a self-righteous excuse to justify his despicable actions. I stared at him, at the man I had once loved with every fiber of my being. Now, in my eyes, he was nothing but a stranger, simultaneously pathetic and despicable. The agonizing pain in my chest slowly solidified into a cold, calculating fury. I laughed. A light, yet razor-sharp chuckle echoed in the quiet space. My smile made Ryan freeze. His smug expression flickered with a hint of confusion. Unexpected, I repeated, my voice steadying. There was not a trace of weakness left in it. Yes, this is indeed very unexpected. I accept your gift. I picked up the gold-plated pen he had just given me, uncapped it, and decisively signed my name on the divorce petition, right beneath his. Done. I pushed the papers back to him, but Ryan, I looked him dead in the eyes with a gaze he had never seen before, a look full of mystery and defiance. You should remember that you reap what you sow. You gave me such a surprising gift. I can't help but return the favor. I slowly stood up and smoothed out the folds of my dress. I'm a bit tired tonight, so I won't be keeping you company any longer. But don't worry. I promise that tomorrow, I will give your entire family an even bigger surprise. I wish you and the mother of your child nothing but happiness. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away into the cold night, leaving Ryan sitting in a daze at the luxurious table, staring at the fully executed divorce papers, his mind spinning. He couldn't fathom what kind of surprise a woman who only knew her way around a kitchen could possibly cook up for him tomorrow, but he would find out soon enough. Tomorrow, I would be the director of this play. The following story contains fictional elements and is created for entertainment purposes, as well as to deliver deep educational lessons about trust, betrayal, and the hidden power of a woman backed into a corner. I invite you to follow the unfolding events. I stepped out of the restaurant. The chilling night wind hit my face, but it couldn't extinguish the inferno raging in my chest. There were no tears because my heart had gone numb. 7 years of sacrifice. 7 years living in a man's shadow. All I got in return was humiliation wrapped in the guise of a luxury anniversary dinner. I hailed a cab, but I didn't head to the Greenwich mansion I once called home. Instead, I gave the driver an address in Manhattan, a place Ryan and his family never knew existed. It was a stunning penthouse on the top floor of a high-rise in the heart of the city. A place where I was truly myself. The place from which I operated my own empire behind the scenes. But before launching tomorrow's battle, I needed to return to that mansion one last time to retrieve what belonged to me and say a final goodbye to my own foolish submission. When I pushed open the front door of the Greenwich estate, the lights were blazing. The atmosphere wasn't guilty or quiet. It was blatantly celebratory. Barbara, my mother-in-law, and Sarah, her daughter, were lounging comfortably on the custom Italian leather sofa. Their faces beamed as if they had just won the Powerball. Seeing me walk in, Barbara didn't even bother to stand. She just tilted her chin up and sneered. "So, you're back. I thought you wouldn't have the nerve to show your face here. Well, go on," she continued. "Pack up your junk so there's more breathing room in this house. And remember, take only your personal items. Every single thing in this house was bought with my Ryan's money. You don't have the right to touch a thing." I stayed silent. I was too used to these venomous words. For 7 years, I had heard them daily, but tonight, they didn't sting. They only made me want to laugh. Ryan's money. She had no idea that even the designer clothes she was currently flaunting were paid for by my company's profits. "Yeah, Kate." Sarah twisted her lips into a mocking grin. "Don't be too sad. A woman needs to know her place. Look at yourself. You're stuck in the kitchen all day. You always smell like cooking oil. How could you ever keep a man like my brother? You should take notes from Chloe. She's beautiful, brilliant, and an heiress. Soon she'll be the daughter-in-law of this house, and Mom and I will be living the dream. Word on the street is her dad promised to inject another $50 million into Ryan's company. Our family is going to the stratosphere." Hearing her daughter's words, Barbara nodded smugly. Her face radiated arrogance, acting as if she already held the world in her hands. Exactly. A daughter-in-law needs to be an equal match. Someone who helps her husband elevate the family name, not a freeloader who only knows how to drain her husband's bank account. A freeloader? I scoffed internally. If I was a freeloader, what did that make them? leeches sucking blood. For 7 years, every single month, I had to quietly divert a hefty sum from the company's profits into Ryan's personal account just so he could hand it over to his mother and sister as allowance. Their Euro trips, their Birkin bags, their luxury spa days in the Hamptons, all of it was funded by this so-called allowance. I didn't say a word. I quietly walked up the stairs to the master bedroom. This was the last time I would tolerate this indignity. I opened the walk-in closet, packed only a few simple outfits, and grabbed my personal laptop. I didn't need anything from this house because this entire luxurious lifestyle was created by me, and I could build something 10 times better. As I was coming back down the stairs with my small suitcase, Ryan walked through the front door. He looked at me without a shred of remorse, only cold authority in his eyes. Packed? Great. From tomorrow on, stay out of my sight. Oh, and one more thing. The annual shareholder meeting is tomorrow morning. You hold some nominal 10% share that my dad left you. Show up on time and sign the transfer papers, handing them over to me. Consider it the final drop of my goodwill toward you. So, he still needs me. He needed one last drop of utility. I looked at him, then at the two women sitting triumphantly on the sofa. I gave a barely perceptible nod, a cryptic smile touching my lips. Don't worry, I will absolutely be there tomorrow, and I promise I won't disappoint you. I pulled my suitcase out the door, leaving behind a family drowning in delusions of impending boundless wealth and power. They didn't know that tomorrow's sunrise would be their sunset, and I would be the one pulling the heavy curtain of darkness down on them. The taxi sped through the night, leaving the sprawling estate behind. 7 years of my youth, 7 years of love and delusion. I didn't look back. I knew that the minute I walked out that door, I completely severed ties with my past. The car pulled up to my Manhattan skyscraper. Suitcase in hand, I stepped into the private elevator and tapped my keycard for the penthouse floor. The doors slid open to reveal an entirely different world, a sprawling, ultramodern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the neon grid of New York City. This was my real world, the world I had painstakingly hidden for the last 7 years. I set my bag down, stripped off the restrictive silk dress, and slipped into comfortable loungewear. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and stood by the window, staring down at the blazing city lights. They looked like fallen stars, yet they could never illuminate the dark corners of the human soul. Memories of the last 7 years rushed back, sharp as a slow-motion film. I remembered the day I first met Ryan. I was an ambitious college grad with an Ivy League degree, and he was just an entry-level drone at a mediocre firm. We fell in love with a pure, selfless kind of love. I was the one who saw his potential. I liquidated all my savings and the trust fund left by my late parents to found Apex Holdings, naming him as the face of it. I stepped into the shadows so he could be the CEO, so he could realize his lofty ambitions. I was his puppet master for every major strategy. I pulled all-nighters perfecting business plans, utilized my extensive network to find strategic partners, and navigated the company through its darkest times. The company scaled, and Ryan changed. He was no longer that simple, earnest guy. He developed a taste for elite galas and sycophants. He began to look down on me, the wife who supposedly only knew how to bake. He convinced himself that all this success was entirely his own doing, and I was just a lucky woman who happened to be along for the ride. He changed roughly 3 years ago, right around the time the company officially went public. It was a massive breakthrough that elevated Ryan and Apex Holdings into a new echelon. From then on, the extended business trips and late-night executive meetings started. I naively bought the lies until one evening, 6 months ago, I accidentally read a text message on his phone that he had forgotten to delete. "Baby, thanks for an amazing night. I can't wait for the day we can be together officially. Kisses, Chloe." My heart shattered into a million pieces. The velvet curtain of our falsely happy marriage was ripped down. Chloe. I knew her. The daughter of the CEO of Pinnacle Group, a massive partner that I had personally courted and brought to the table. How long had they been sneaking around? That night, I cried until I had no tears left. But after the excruciating pain came a cold, sharp, sobering reality. I realized I couldn't just surrender. I had sacrificed too much. I couldn't let these traitors strip me of everything I had built. I began to prepare, in secret, for today. I retained the most vicious corporate lawyer in the city, I covertly gathered ironclad evidence of Ryan's infidelity and his egregious embezzlement of company funds to bankroll his mistress and his family's lavish lifestyle. I met with Ryan's father, Michael Sr., a good man, but retired and in failing health. He had always loved and trusted me. I showed him the evidence. Deeply devastated by his son's actions, he agreed to help me. Before he passed away, he quietly signed an irrevocable trust and transfer agreement, handing his entire majority block of shares over to me. He told me that this company was his life's work, and he couldn't let it fall into the hands of an ungrateful son and a scheming homewrecker. He had only one condition. I had to wait for the absolute perfect moment to teach Ryan a lesson he would remember for the rest of his life. And that moment was tomorrow. The annual shareholder meeting. The day Ryan and his mistress thought they would seize it all. But they were dead wrong. They were nothing but marionettes in a play I had written. I took a sip of wine. Its dry, astringent taste coated my tongue, much like my marriage. But after the bitterness came the sweet finish of impending freedom. I picked up my phone and dialed Aaron, my most trusted executive assistant, and the only person who knew my true identity and plans. Hello, Aaron. Is everything ready for tomorrow? Yes, Madam Chairman. Everything is locked and loaded. We're just waiting for your signal. Excellent. Tomorrow, we show them who really runs this game. I hung up, staring out at the city that never sleeps. Tonight would be my final night of submission. Tomorrow's dawn would bring an entirely new world. While I was quietly positioning the final pieces on the chessboard for tomorrow's checkmate, across the city, in a rooftop bar of a five-star hotel, Ryan and his mistress Chloe were drowning in the intoxicating taste of a victory they thought they already held in their hands. They hadn't gone back to the Greenwich house, probably because my presence would have soured their mood. Furthermore, Ryan wanted to spend this night with the woman he considered his future, his ultimate career springboard. Champagne bubbles fizzed in delicate crystal flutes, reflecting the dazzling city skyline. Ryan wrapped his arm around Chloe's slender waist and whispered sweet nothings into her ear, words I probably hadn't heard in all 7 years. Baby, this day is finally here. I'm officially a free man. Now I can truly be with you. Give you the title you deserve. Chloe leaned her head against Ryan's shoulder. Her long fingers with their bright red manicures traced the lapel of his jacket. Her voice was flirtatious, yet deeply calculating. I knew you could pull it off, babe. Did your old ball and chain finally sign the papers? She didn't cause a scene? I figured a clingy housewife like her would be sobbing on her knees, begging you not to leave, Ryan chuckled. His smile was bloated with self-satisfaction and disdained, the smile of a master discussing a lowly servant. Where would she get the guts? A woman who spends all day trapped in 4 walls and a kitchen. Where would she find the spine to throw a fit? I just threw her a pathetic little settlement, and she looked like she hit the jackpot. I threatened to cut her off without a dime if she made a fuss. She turned pale and signed like a good little girl, didn't even dare to squeak. Seriously, what a stupid, weak woman. Good, Chloe said, stroking Ryan's cheek. Now nothing and no one is standing in our way. My dad agreed. He said the second you finalize this dragged-out divorce, he's wiring the $50 million investment straight into Apex Holdings. Think about it, with that $50 mil, plus the weight and connections of Pinnacle Group, we'll turn Apex into an absolute empire. You won't just be a CEO, you'll be a titan, and it's all thanks to you, my love. Ryan kissed Chloe passionately, his hands roaming her curves. Tomorrow, at the shareholder meeting, I'm officially announcing the divorce to the board. At the same time, I'm demanding that woman sign over the last 10% of the shares my senile father left her. Even though it's a small chunk, I don't want a single microscopic thing related to her left in my company. I want her entirely erased from my life. Chloe frowned slightly, feigning concern. Will she sign? I mean, at the end of the day, that's a lot of money. What if she changes her mind and starts causing drama? Ryan laughed again. The laugh of a man who believed he held the universe on a string. Don't worry, I talked to corporate counsel. Legally, those shares are considered marital assets. She has no choice but to sign. Plus, I'll throw her a little hush money so she gets out faster. For someone like her, used to keeping her head down and leeching off others, it'll be enough to live out her miserable life without making waves. They clinked their glasses. The sharp chime of crystal rang through the air, celebrating a plan they believed was flawless. Not a single loophole. They began discussing their dream wedding on a private island in the Maldives, the new mega mansion they'd buy after selling the Greenwich house with its bad energy, and the brilliant, power-drenched future waiting for them. Drunk on fake love, materialistic calculations, and perceived power, they entirely forgot my parting words. Words they had dismissed as the bitter rantings of a defeated woman. They couldn't possibly imagine that the woman they so deeply despised, the one they viewed as a useless pawn, was actually holding the fate of the entire board in her hands. They eagerly painted their rosy future, oblivious to the fact that right beneath their feet, a massive abyss had already been dug. And promptly at 8 a.m. tomorrow, I would personally, without an ounce of pity, shove them right into it. That night, Ryan didn't come home. He stayed in the presidential suite with his mistress, soaking up his final moments of delusional bliss. As for me, with all my ducks in a row, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. It was the most peaceful rest I'd had in 6 months, since the day I uncovered the bitter truth. I dreamed of a brilliant sunrise over the ocean, and I knew it wasn't just a dream, but an omen. The dawn of the next day brought an entirely different electric charge to the air. The sky was a crisp, cloudless blue. But for Ryan's family, it was a monumental day, the day they believed would alter their dynasty forever. From the crack of dawn, the Greenwich mansion was a hive of frantic activity. Barbara and Sarah had been buzzing around for hours. They pulled out their most extravagant designer dresses and their heaviest jewelry. Barbara, draped in a deep burgundy velvet gown with a massive string of South Sea pearls, looked like a queen prepping for a coronation. Sarah had squeezed into a fresh-off-the-runway Gucci dress, her makeup spackled on flawlessly, looking like a celebrity about to hit the red carpet. They wanted to strut into that shareholder meeting looking absolutely regal, to show every single executive who the real royalty of Apex Holdings was. Ryan returned to the house at 7 a.m. He was impeccably dressed in a bespoke Italian suit, his hair slicked back, his face glowing with a winner's high. He looked at his mother and sister and nodded in extreme satisfaction. Perfect. Today we need to look flawless so everyone respects the pedigree of our family, and so Kate realizes exactly what she lost when she walked away. What does that peasant even know about loss and gain? Barbara scoffed. That country bumpkin is probably huddled in some dirty corner crying her eyes out right now. I just hope she doesn't throw a tantrum at the meeting and embarrass us. Mom, relax, Ryan said confidently. I warned security and legal. If she tries to pull a stunt, the guards will drag her out immediately. Today is our day, and nobody is going to ruin it. They piled into a chauffeur-driven Maybach and headed toward the Apex Holdings Tower in Midtown Manhattan, where the annual shareholder meeting was set to commence. The luxury car glided through the streets, filled with booming laughter and dreams of an untouchable, ultra-rich future. Meanwhile, across town, I was also ready. I was no longer the woman in an apron with her hair tied in a messy bun. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror and examined my reflection. A custom-tailored, stark white Tom Ford power suit fit me perfectly, commanding authority. My long hair was blown out into sleek, cascading waves. My makeup was razor-sharp, accentuating my fierce eyes and striking red lips. I radiated an entirely different aura, absolute confidence, raw power, and a chilling aura of mystery. My assistant, Aaron, was already waiting outside the double doors. He looked at me with unconcealed awe. Madam Chairman, you look spectacular today. I smiled faintly. Thank you. Is everything in place? Every piece is on the board, Madam Chairman. Mr. Vance, our lead counsel, has also arrived. He's waiting in the lobby. Excellent. Let's go. It's time to drop the curtain. As my black Rolls-Royce pulled into the VIP underground garage of the Apex Tower, Ryan's family Maybach was pulling up right alongside it. They stepped out of their car with their noses practically pointing at the ceiling, ready to absorb the greetings and groveling of the staff. But in that exact moment, they saw me. I stepped out of the gleaming Rolls-Royce. Behind me flanked Aaron and an elegant, silver-haired man in a razor-sharp suit, corporate powerhouse attorney Arthur Vance. My arrival hit the three of them like a lightning bolt. Ryan's jaw literally dropped. His eyes bulged in absolute shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. The chic, aristocratic, terrifyingly beautiful woman standing before him was the same wife he had discarded the night before. Barbara and Sarah openly gaped at me, their eyes scanning everything from my designer suit and the Rolls-Royce to the sheer, suffocating power I was projecting. Their gazes were a cocktail of astonishment, rabid envy, and a creeping sense of dread. I didn't even grant them the dignity of a glance. I acted as if they were invisible air. With my head held high, flanked by my lawyer and assistant, I marched straight into the main lobby and onto the private executive elevator. Up in the boardroom, the other shareholders had already gathered. Every eye in the room pivoted to me. Whispers immediately broke out. They were shocked by my massive transformation, and even more stunned that I was being escorted by Arthur Vance, a legal titan in the corporate world that no ordinary person could afford on retainer. Ryan and his family scrambled into the room moments after me. Their earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by frantic confusion and a very bad premonition. Their day of reckoning had officially begun. The grand boardroom of Apex Holdings, often referred to as the heart of the empire, was packed today with majority and minority shareholders. The atmosphere was formal, heavy with anticipation. Everyone was waiting for CEO Ryan's keynote address, a speech expected to map out a year of explosive growth, heavily fueled by rumors of a massive imminent cash injection. Ryan sat at the head of the massive mahogany table. The plush leather chair suddenly didn't seem to offer him any comfort. He tried to project his usual slick confidence, adjusting his Tom Ford tie and flashing boardroom smiles, but his eyes kept darting nervously toward me. I sat quietly in the front row reserved for founders, right next to Arthur Vance. My presence, in this entirely new avatar, was like a thorn in his eye, a screeching false note in the victory symphony he had already written. Barbara and Sarah, acting as the VIP relatives of the CEO, sat in premium seats. They tried to look posh and elite, but their faces betrayed their panic as they took in my transformation and heard the hushed, awed whispers of the executives around them. The meeting commenced. After the dry formalities, the financial disclosures, and the year-in-review PowerPoint slides, the moment everyone was waiting for finally arrived. Ryan stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and launched into his speech. He pontificated about the company's stellar achievements and impressive profit margins. He painted a vibrant, aggressive roadmap for market dominance and hostile takeovers of competitors. He spoke eloquently, persuasively, perfectly playing the part of the visionary wonderkind the business press adored. But only I and a select few others knew that those beautiful charts and numbers were heavily fabricated. They were the result of aggressive accounting fraud, inflated profits, and wildly risky off-the-books liabilities designed to artificially inflate the stock and lure in investors. Wrapping up his flowery speech, Ryan paused dramatically. His gaze locked directly onto me. His tone shifted into something solemn and theatrical, like an actor hitting the climax of a soap opera. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to our aggressive expansion targets for the new fiscal year, I must make a personal, yet critical announcement that directly impacts our shareholder structure and the future of this firm. He looked around the room. Due to irreconcilable personal differences, my wife Kate and I have decided to dissolve our marriage. The boardroom erupted into surprised murmurs. All eyes snapped to me. Some looked curious, others sympathetic. Ryan put on a pained, stoic face, playing the victim of a tragic union. This was an incredibly difficult decision, but it is necessary so we can both find peace. Per our settlement, Kate has agreed to transfer the 10% of equity she currently holds directly to me, ensuring I can dedicate my undivided focus to scaling this company. I trust you will all respect our privacy during this transition. He spoke as if it was a done deal, as if I had already fully complied. He wanted to weaponize the peer pressure of the entire board to force me into accepting his fabricated reality. He was dead certain that a docile housewife like me wouldn't dare do anything but lower my head and submit. He miscalculated horribly. The second Ryan finished speaking, while the board was still buzzing, the heavy double oak doors of the boardroom swung violently open. A tall, imposing man with a stern face and an aura of absolute authority stormed in, flanked by an entourage of fixers and aides. It was Victor Sterling, chairman of Pinnacle Group, Chloe's father, and Apex's largest strategic partner. His sudden intrusion shocked the entire room, Ryan included. According to Ryan's script, Victor wasn't supposed to arrive until the very end of the meeting, after Ryan had consolidated absolute power to ceremoniously announce the $50 million investment. "Victor? Mr. Sterling? Why are you here so early?" Ryan stammered, hurrying out from behind the podium to greet him. His face was a mask of shock and creeping panic. Victor didn't even look at Ryan. He completely ignored Ryan's extended hand, marched straight up to the podium, and aggressively snatched the microphone right out of Ryan's grasp. "I apologize for interrupting your proceedings," Victor's booming voice echoed off the glass walls. I came here today as a strategic partner of Apex Holdings to announce an immediate and binding decision. Pinnacle Group is officially withdrawing our promised $50 million capital injection. We are cutting all ties with Apex Holdings. This decision is effective immediately. His words hit the boardroom like a tactical nuke. The executives gasped, reeling in shock. Ryan's face drained of all color, turning the shade of printer paper. He physically stumbled backward. Sir. Mr. Sterling, you're joking, right? Why? Why so suddenly? We had an ironclad agreement. If something is wrong, tell me. I'll fix it right now. Ryan panicked, his voice cracking, grasping at straws. Victor turned slowly to Ryan, glaring at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. An agreement? You have the audacity to speak to me about agreements? Do you think I'm some senile old fool you can easily con? You cooked the books, Ryan. You fabricated your EBITDA and inflated your revenue streams to defraud me and to defraud every single shareholder sitting in this room. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? No! No, that's a misunderstanding. Someone is trying to frame me. Who? Who fed you this garbage? Ryan screamed frantically. Victor didn't answer him. Instead, he turned to look directly at me. His eyes held a mixture of deep respect and a trace of guilt. The person who provided me with the irrefutable forensic evidence. The person who saved me from looking like a colossal fool. Is Kate. Another nuclear bomb. The entire boardroom stopped breathing. The collective gaze of 50 executives whipped from Ryan to me. Ryan stared at me in total disbelief, his face contorting with a mix of shock, rage, terror, and absolute bewilderment. You? What did you do? Why would you do this to me? To our company? I stood up slowly, smoothed my blazer, and walked calmly up to the front, standing shoulder to shoulder with Victor, face to face with Ryan. I looked him dead in the eyes, a cold, lethal smile curling my lips. Surprise, Ryan. And this is just the appetizer. You taught me a very valuable lesson. In business, there is no room for blind trust. Thank you for that lesson. My first unexpected gift had been opened. Ryan's perfectly constructed illusion began to show catastrophic, unfixable cracks, and I knew for a fact he wouldn't survive the avalanche that was about to follow. The boardroom, previously buzzing with whispers, fell into a graveyard silence following my declaration. Everyone held their breath, like an audience watching a high-stakes thriller, waiting to see how this brutal drama would unfold. Ryan, recovering from the sheer whiplash of his biggest investor exposing his fraud on live mic, seemed to scrape together the last dregs of his corporate survival instinct. He knew that if he folded now, he'd lose everything. He tried to force a smile. It was crooked, frantic, and pathetic. A misunderstanding. This is all a massive misunderstanding, ladies and gentlemen. He projected his voice, trying to override the tension. Perhaps my wife, Kate, blinded by grief and anger over our impending divorce, acted erratically and fed Mr. Play's Sterling manipulated data. I swear to you all on my life, my hands are clean. We will resolve this private domestic dispute immediately. I apologize for the disruption. He was slick. In just a few sentences, he tried to spin the narrative entirely. He painted me as a hysterical, vindictive ex-wife willing to torpedo her husband's empire over a petty grudge. He leaned close to me and hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper only audible near the podium. Are you insane, Kate? What do you get out of this? You're destroying the company with your own hands. Do you understand that if Pinnacle pulls out, Apex goes bankrupt? I simply looked at him. There was no anger in my eyes anymore, only clinical pity. He still naively believed this was his company. I let out a soft laugh, and the sound made him flinch. The company? Are you absolutely sure this is your company, Ryan? Without giving him a second to process, I turned to the shareholders. My voice rang out crisp, commanding, and crystal clear. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you are all incredibly confused, but I ask for just 5 minutes of your time to clarify the reality of this situation. It is true that Ryan and I are divorcing, but the reason is far from what he claimed. And Pinnacle Group pulling their capital isn't an act of a hysterical woman. It is the inevitable legal consequence of his fraudulent and highly illegal corporate malfeasance. I gave a subtle nod to Arthur Vance, who had been standing by like a loaded gun. He stepped forward, clicked open his designer leather briefcase, and pulled out a thick, legal dossier stamped with heavy notary seals. "Distinguished board members," Attorney Vance began, his voice a low, terrifying rumble of authority. "I am here to execute a legally binding document of the highest order, one that directly dictates the true equity structure of Apex Holdings." He handed the file to the board secretary. The secretary, looking visibly shaken, quickly scanned the document and projected it onto the massive 4K screen behind the podium for the entire room to read. "According to the corporate registry that you are all familiar with," Vance continued, pointing a laser pointer at the screen, "Ryan currently sits as the majority shareholder with 41% of the voting stock. Kate holds 10%, left by the late founder, and the remaining 49% is distributed among you and institutional investors. Correct?" The executives nodded. That was the cap table everyone knew. It was the bedrock of Ryan's power for years. However, Vance's voice hardened, and a new document flashed onto the screen. "Here is the truth that has been legally sealed until this exact moment." Displayed for everyone to see was an irrevocable trust and equity transfer agreement, executed 2 years ago. What sent a shockwave through the room was the signature and thumbprint at the bottom. Michael Sr., Ryan's late father and the original founder. The terms were aggressively clear. Before his death, the late chairman willingly and legally transferred his entire 41% stake not to his son Ryan, but to his daughter-in-law Kate. The document was notarized, legally bulletproof, but kept under seal per his dying wish. "What? What is this?" Ryan shrieked. His face went chalk white. He lunged toward the screen as if trying to physically tear it down. "Impossible. It's a forgery. This is a fake. My father would never do this. I was his blood." "Ryan, please maintain your composure and respect your late father," Vance said without a millimeter of sympathy. "This is an ironclad legal document, authenticated by the highest state courts. If you wish to contest it, I'll gladly see you in federal court." The late chairman executed this because he recognized his son's blind greed and destructive lifestyle years ago. He was terrified his life's work would be driven into the ground. He trusted the brilliance, the strategic mind, and most importantly, the ethics of Kate, the woman who actually built this company alongside him from day one. He transferred the keys to the kingdom to the only person he knew could protect it. Vance's explanation swung down like an executioner's axe. It shattered Ryan's ego and authority into a million irreparable pieces. The room erupted, not in whispers this time, but in genuine shouts of shock. Math is math. Combining the 41% with the 10% I already held, I was the undisputed majority owner. I controlled 51% of Apex Holdings. I was the absolute dictator of the board. And Ryan, with his 0% equity, was nothing more than a W-2 employee, a hired gun sitting in a chair I owned. This brutal truth was infinitely more agonizing than losing an investor or a mistress. It completely vaporized the foundation of his fake reality. He staggered back, his knees giving out, collapsing into the chair behind him. He looked at me with eyes devoid of arrogance. All that was left was primal fear and absolute bewilderment. "Why? Why did you hide this from me? Why now?" he wheezed, his voice broken. "Hide it from you?" I smirked, stepping right into his personal space, looking down at him. "Weren't you the one who always claimed you were the mastermind? The self-made genius? Didn't you always look down on me as a useless parasite? I just wanted to see how far you could really go without me quietly fixing your mistakes, without the strategies I spoon-fed you. And the results speak for themselves. You nearly bankrupted this company because of your bottomless greed and sheer stupidity." Suddenly, Barbara, who had been sitting frozen in the VIP row, snapped out of her trance like a cornered wild animal. Her brain simply couldn't process this reality. Her golden boy, her ultimate pride, was just a glorified employee working for the very daughter-in-law she treated like human garbage. The humiliation triggered pure hysteria. She lunged forward, ignoring the security guards trying to hold her back, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at me. "You witch! What kind of voodoo did you use on my father-in-law? You scheming, gold-digging whore! Give my son his company back!" The boardroom descended into chaos at her unhinged outburst, but I stood completely unfazed. I knew the best act of this play, the one tailored specifically for her, was up next. Barbara's rage was like a grease fire. She abandoned any pretense of being a high society matriarch and rushed the podium, trying to physically claw at my Tom Ford suit. "You venomous snake! We brought a viper into our home. I knew from day one you were trash. Our family is cursed for letting you in. Give back everything that belongs to my son," she screeched, using language so vile you'd only hear it in a dive bar at 3 a.m. Security guards rushed to restrain her, but she thrashed around like a feral cat. Her $500 blowout was ruined, hair flying in every direction, her expensive mascara smearing down her face. Ryan sat there, gray-faced, completely catatonic. He didn't even try to stop his mother. Maybe because he was in clinical shock. Or maybe, deep down, he hoped his mother's tantrum would somehow save him. Sarah ran up, yanking on her mother's arm and sobbing, playing the victim in this daytime soap opera. "Mom, calm down. Mom, your blood pressure. Kate, how could you be so evil? My brother and my mother treated you like royalty. We gave you a life of luxury. How dare you steal the fruits of our family's labor? Treated me like royalty?" I interrupted her with a smile so frigid it made both of them physically recoil. "Are you sure your family treated me well? Or was it just scraps you tossed me, bought with my own damn money?" I didn't bother arguing with them. Words were cheap. Instead, I turned to Aaron and gave him a subtle nod. Aaron was a machine. He instantly plugged his encrypted laptop into the boardroom's AV system. The giant screen, which had been displaying the fatal stock transfer, suddenly went black. The room went dead silent. Everyone stared at the screen, terrified of what nuke I was about to drop next. A few seconds later, a high-def video started playing. It wasn't a corporate presentation. It was security camera footage. Specifically, hidden micro-camera footage I had installed in the chief accountant's office months ago after I noticed massive bleeding in the operating budget. In the first clip, Barbara and Sarah were sitting across from Arthur Pendleton. The chief financial officer, a distant cousin Barbara, had aggressively pushed Ryan to hire. On screen, Barbara was flipping through a Vogue magazine, pointing at a handbag. "Arthur, look at this gorgeous Birkin. Limited edition. I need you to cut me a check for $25,000 against Ryan's business development account this month. He's been entertaining clients nonstop, right?" The CFO, a sweaty, middle-aged man, nodded furiously like a lapdog. "Of course, Barbara. Not a problem. I'll code it under client retention." He quickly processed the wire, handed her a thick envelope of petty cash to hold her over, and she smiled greedily. The second video was even more damning. This time, it was Sarah, flanked by her trust fund friends. She strolled into the finance office, slammed a black Amex on the desk, and demanded, "Arthur, my card declined. I need $50,000 wired to my personal account by noon. Me and the girls are booking a VIP cabana at Coachella." Arthur hesitated, looking nervous. "Sarah, the company is under a strict spending freeze. Ryan specifically ordered a halt on non-essential expenditures." Sarah rolled her eyes and stomped her designer heel. "If you don't do it, I'm calling my mom." "Do you want her to tell my brother to fire your fat ass?" "My brother does whatever my mom says. It's just 50 grand, Arthur. Hide it in marketing or R&D or whatever you do." Arthur caved immediately, typing away to fund the little princess's desert rave. Clip after clip played, brutally exposing the mother-daughter duo colluding with the CFO to systematically siphon hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company's operational budget, masking it as Ryan's executive expenses. The total amount embezzled was staggering, running into the millions. It funded their Hamptons rentals, their shopping sprees, and their first-class flights. They treated a publicly traded company built on the sweat and equity of every shareholder in this room like their personal endless ATM, and they drained it gleefully, completely unaware they were starring in a documentary of their own federal crimes. When the final video faded to black, the silence in the room was suffocating. The executives' expressions morphed from shock to absolute. Venomous disgust aimed squarely at the mother and daughter, their grand illusion of being a noble, old-money family, of being a mother sacrificing for her CEO son, was incinerated. They were exposed as nothing but common thieves. Barbara turned to stone. Her face was the color of a corpse. She wobbled on her heels, pointing a shaking finger at the screen, then at me, stammering incoherently. You set me up." Sarah had already collapsed onto the carpet, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably from terror and shame. She wasn't an idiot. She knew that with this HD evidence, they weren't just humiliated, they were going to federal prison. Ladies and gentlemen, I broke the silence, my voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. This is how my husband's family treated me well. And this is how they contributed to the growth of this firm. They turned this company into their personal piggy bank, embezzling the assets of every shareholder sitting at this table. I turned to Ryan. And you, Ryan, the CEO. Did you know about this? Or did you know and deliberately look the other way, sanctioning this felony fraud just so your mother and sister would stroke your ego and tell you what a wonderful boy you are? Ryan looked at his mother and sister groveling on the floor, then up at me. His eyes were hollow, filled with despair and self-hatred. He couldn't deny it. Even if he didn't personally authorize the wires, his gross negligence and complicity as CEO was an unforgivable breach of fiduciary duty. The facade of the genius CEO was dead, and now it was time for the final actor in Ryan's tragicomedy to take the stage. While the boardroom was drowning in chaos and Ryan's family was being crucified by the collective glare of the board, the woman Ryan called his future Chloe finally reacted. She had been sitting in the back corner, trying to look detached from the escalating bloodbath. But Chloe wasn't stupid. She was a ruthless, pragmatic socialite. She realized very quickly that the luxury cruise ship named Apex Holdings she was trying to board was actually the Titanic, already snapped in half. And Captain Ryan wasn't a billionaire titan. He was a broke, powerless puppet whose strings had just been cut, and who was likely heading to a federal penitentiary. Her dream of being a billionaire CEO's wife, of ruling a corporate empire, went up in smoke in the span of 20 minutes. The only thing waiting for her now was a subpoena and a PR nightmare for being an accessory to a family of white-collar criminals. Her shock instantly transmuted into lethal rage and disgust. There was no way a Manhattan heiress was going down with this garbage scow. While Ryan was still glued to his chair, his head spinning, Chloe abruptly stood up. She marched to the front of the room, her Louboutin heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. She walked right up to Ryan, who looked up at her with pathetic, desperate eyes, praying for a lifeline. Smack! The sharp, wet sound of a brutal slap echoed across the boardroom. 5 bright red finger marks blossomed on Ryan's pale cheek. The room gasped again. The drama was violently pivoting, better than any HBO finale. "You are a fraud!" Chloe screamed, her voice shrill with fury. She jabbed a manicured acrylic nail directly into Ryan's face. "You told me you were the chairman. You told me you owned it all. You said you were a titan. You're nothing but a broke employee living off your wife's charity. You had the nerve to lie to my father? To use fake financials to steal his money? You are a pathetic, lying sociopath." Ryan clutched his stinging cheek. He was completely blindsided. He stammered, grabbing at her wrist. "Chloe, please, listen to me. It's not what you think. I can fix this. We can fix this together." "Fix this?" Chloe let out a venomous, barking laugh. "The FBI is going to be raiding this building in an hour, and you want to fix this? A puppet CEO who is about to be penniless. A family of literal thieves. Why the hell would I ever marry you? Do you think my family is stupid enough to attach our name to a sinking dumpster fire? You humiliated me." She violently ripped her arm away and turned to her father, Victor Sterling, who had been watching the slaughter with a face carved from granite. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was an idiot to believe this con artist. I let his fake numbers blind me. Let's go. If I stay in this room for one more minute, I'm going to vomit." Then, Chloe pivoted toward the audience of executives and loudly proclaimed, legally distancing herself from the blast radius. "I, Chloe Sterling, declare right here and now that I have absolutely zero association with this man. Any business agreements he discussed with my father are dead. Pinnacle Group does not deal with felons." Without a single glance backward, Chloe grabbed her father's arm and stormed out of the boardroom. She discarded him with the exact same ruthless cruelty she had used when she helped blow up my marriage. Ryan sat frozen, the ultimate spectacle of failure. In the span of an hour, he was overthrown and exposed by the wife he discarded. And then he was slapped, humiliated, and dumped by the mistress he worshipped, live in front of the most powerful people in the city. Love, career, money, reputation, everything he had built on a foundation of lies collapsed into dust. He stared vacantly at the double doors Chloe had just walked through, then slowly turned his head back to me. His eyes held hatred, but mostly a pathetic, broken helplessness. Watching him, I felt a deep appreciation for the universe's brutal sense of karma. Ryan repaid the woman who sacrificed everything for him with a knife in the back. In return, he got an even deeper, more humiliating knife in the chest from the woman he threw it all away for. A relationship built on lies and dollar signs is a house of cards. A single gust of truth will flatten it. After Victor and Chloe left, leaving total devastation in their wake, a heavy silence settled over the room again. The executives looked at Ryan and his family with unfiltered disdain and a hefty dose of schadenfreude. It was a spectacular implosion. But my surprises weren't over. I knew that to completely crush their greed and sever any delusion of a comeback, I had to salt the earth. I had to take away the very last thing they clung to. I stepped back up to the podium, tapped the microphone, and my calm, dictatorial voice commanded the room once more. Esteemed shareholders, I apologize for allowing this domestic trash to eat into our valuable time. We will resume the actual agenda shortly. I looked down at Ryan, still catatonic, then at Barbara and Sarah, cowering in a corner like beaten dogs. But first, I have a third and final surprise, I said, my tone dropping to sub-zero. This is a parting gift specifically for my former mother-in-law, who loved to call me a freeloader. I signaled Arthur Vance again. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a final dossier, even thicker than the rest. Mrs. Barbara, Attorney Vance said, stepping down from the podium and walking directly toward her. According to public records, your family currently resides at a $15 million estate at 9 Rosewood Lane in Greenwich, Connecticut. Is that correct? Barbara lifted her head. Her dead eyes blinked, and she gave an involuntary robotic nod. That mega mansion was her ultimate pride, the crown jewel she bragged about at every country club luncheon, boasting about her genius billionaire son. Then I regret to inform you of some unfortunate news, Vance said, his face a mask of legal indifference. 6 months ago, in order to cover a massive liquidity crisis, triggered entirely by the millions you and your daughter embezzled your son, Ryan, took out a massive high-yield bridge loan to keep the company's lights on. He used the Greenwich estate as collateral. Barbara and Sarah froze. Ryan flinched violently, his eyes snapping wide. No, I didn't do that. I never signed any mortgage documents. You didn't. But I did it for you. I cut him off, my voice like crushed ice. As the true majority shareholder and the actual controlling entity of this company, I demanded you sign a blanket power of attorney giving me control over emergency financial restructuring. And you signed it without even reading it, because you were too busy booking first-class tickets to Paris with your mistress. You were so convinced I was a stupid, blind housewife. Vance didn't give them a second to breathe. The maturity date on that balloon loan expired yesterday at 5 p.m. And obviously, given the company's current cash flow issues caused primarily by your family's theft, the company opted to default. Therefore, legally, the creditor has exercised their right to seize the collateral. The Greenwich estate is being foreclosed on immediately to settle the debt. The creditor? Which bank? I'll go down there right now and demand an extension, Barbara shrieked, a desperate, manic spark lighting up her eyes. I smiled. The slow, predatory smile of a victor. It's not a bank. No regulated bank would underwrite a toxic loan that fast. The creditor is a private equity distressed debt fund. I paused, letting the silence stretch for maximum psychological damage. And the managing partner of that private equity fund, strictly by coincidence, is me. Kate. Boom. The final, apocalyptic bomb detonated. The entire family practically stopped breathing. They couldn't fathom that I had engineered a trap so brilliant and ruthless. Not only did I legally strip them of their corporate power and their stolen wealth, I had legally orchestrated the hostile takeover of the very roof over their heads. Therefore, I declared, swinging the executioner's blade down. At this exact moment, a team of federal marshals, along with my fund's asset managers, are parked in the driveway of that estate. You have exactly 24 hours to pack your clothes and get out. Anything left in that house after 24 hours, from the imported Italian furniture to the spoons in the kitchen, becomes my personal property to partially offset the millions you stole. My words were a death sentence. That house was all they had left. It was the physical manifestation of their ego. And now, I owned it. Barbara's brain finally short-circuited. Her eyes rolled back into her head. Her body went entirely limp, and she passed out cold right there on the boardroom carpet. This time, it wasn't an act. Sarah screamed like a banshee. She scrambled over to me on her hands and knees, grabbing the hem of my pants, weeping hysterically. "Kate, I'm begging you! Please, have mercy on us just this once. If you kick us out, we'll be homeless." I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I looked down at her without a single ounce of empathy and casually stepped back, freeing my leg from her grasp. "When you and your mother treated me like an unpaid maid, when you bled this company dry to buy concert tickets and purses, did you ever stop to think this day would come? This is the invoice for your greed and your stupidity. Go figure out your own housing." I turned my back, disgusted by the pathetic display. The play was over. It was time for the bad actors to get off my stage and return to the gutter where they belonged. The boardroom was in total pandemonium. Someone called 911 for Barbara. Sarah remained curled in a fetal position on the floor, weeping, while the executives actively stepped over her, whispering in a mix of horror and deep satisfaction at seeing the arrogant family eradicated. Ryan, absorbing the sheer magnitude of his destruction, finally snapped out of his catatonic state. He realized he had lost everything. The company, the money, the mistress, the mansion. Despair mutated into sheer, animalistic terror. He realized the only human being on planet Earth who could save him from living in a cardboard box was me. He threw himself to the floor, crawling toward me, falling to his knees in front of 50 powerful executives. "Kate, I was wrong. God, I know I was wrong." He grabbed at my legs, tears streaming down his face. He looked unimaginably pathetic. "It's all my fault. I'm a monster. I'm a worthless husband. But please, give me one more chance. Let my family live. Whatever you want, I'll do it. Just don't throw my mother and sister onto the street. They can't survive out there." He was trying to launch a new spin-off show, The Repentant Husband. He desperately tried to shift the blame onto the mistress who had just abandoned him. It was all Chloe. She seduced me. She used her dad's money to brainwash me. I just lost my mind for a second. Deep down, I still love you, Kate. 7 years. We fought through the trenches for 7 years. Have you forgotten all of that? Hearing his begging, I felt a wave of sheer revulsion. Even now, with a gun to his head, he couldn't stop lying. He really thought I was still that soft, naive girl from our 20s. "Love me?" I sneered, leaning down to look right into his tear-filled eyes. My gaze was absolute zero. "You claim she seduced you? That you lost your mind for a second? Then how do you explain this?" I didn't need to say another word. Aaron was already on it. He fired up the projector one last time. This time, it wasn't embezzlement footage. It was a rapid-fire slideshow of high-res photos and video clips. Ryan and Chloe making out in a cabana in Street Barts. Ryan and Chloe drinking champagne on a balcony in Paris. The exact trips he swore were high-stakes investor meetings. Copies of Amex statements showing hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on Cartier bracelets, a Porsche 911, and Birkin bags for Chloe, and the absolute kill shot, the timestamps. These weren't from a brief moment of weakness 6 months ago. The timestamps went back 3 full years. "Look at the screen, Ryan," I said. My voice dead and hollow. "You've been screwing her for 3 years. You didn't lose your mind for a second. While I was sitting at home, worrying about your stress levels, cooking your meals and pinching pennies to keep the household running, you were flying around the globe playing sugar daddy to another woman using the money I earned for this firm, and you have the audacity to say you love me? Your love is cheap and filthy." Ryan froze, staring at the HD proof of his 3-year double life. The blood drained from his face entirely. His final pathetic act was completely dismantled. He had absolutely nothing left to say. No spin, no lies, no excuses. He just dropped his head, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably. The utter destruction of this family played out in high definition for everyone to see. The glittering facade of wealth and prestige was violently ripped away, leaving only the rotting core of greed, narcissism, and deceit. They had marched themselves straight off a cliff, and no one was going to throw them a rope. The shareholder meeting ended in a way no one could have ever predicted. I walked in as a discarded housewife, and walked out as the undisputed chairman of a corporate empire. Ryan's family plummeted from the penthouse straight into the pavement. But I knew that to permanently break Ryan's spirit, to ensure he never even dreamed of trying to retaliate, I had to drop the final guillotine blade. I had to expose the darkest secret that only I knew. A secret that would annihilate whatever shred of masculinity and ego he had left. I looked down at Ryan, still kneeling on the floor, and at Sarah, sobbing like a toddler. Ryan, stand up. We are going to clarify one last thing before we sever ties forever. Ryan slowly staggered to his feet, swaying like a drunk. His eyes were totally vacant. He was a puppet with severed strings. You said you were divorcing me because Chloe is pregnant with your child, correct? I asked, my voice flat, almost clinical. You needed to give her status. That was the excuse you used to sleep at night, and probably the lie she fed you to accelerate the divorce and get access to the company. Ryan gave a slow, mechanical nod. It was the perfect excuse, the ultimate, honorable reason to throw me away, so he could look in the mirror and pretend he was just a man stepping up to his responsibilities. Well, then I deeply regret to inform you of a medical tragedy, I said. A cruel twist of pity in my eyes. You really should have followed up with your urologist. According to this medical file, I held up a sealed manila envelope stamped with the logo of Mount Sinai Medical Center. 2 years ago, when you were hospitalized with that severe viral infection, you developed severe secondary complications, specifically, total and irreversible sterility. You shoot blanks, Ryan. You physically cannot father a child. The boardroom gasped collectively. A few executives actually covered their mouths. Ryan stared at me, his eyes wide, unblinking. No, impossible. You're lying. You forged that to hurt me. You're a sick, vindictive bitch, he shrieked, backing away in sheer denial. Forged it? I laughed bitterly. Did you forget? You were on a ventilator for a week. I spent 14 nights sleeping in that ICU chair praying you wouldn't die. These are the lab results from Mount Sinai. The chief of medicine pulled me aside privately. I begged him to seal the file. I didn't want to destroy your massive ego or your fragile masculinity. I thought, with time and modern IVF, we could figure it out together. But I never, in my wildest nightmares, imagined that while I was busting my ass to protect your pride, you would use a bastard child as a weapon to stab me in the back. The naked truth hit him like a freight train. Ryan froze. He remembered the hospital stay. He remembered how weak he felt for months afterward. The math added up perfectly, but his brain violently rejected the reality. Then, whose baby is it? He whispered, his voice cracking into a whimper. It sure as hell isn't yours, I said, my voice laced with venomous irony. Chloe is a very smart, very ruthless player. You weren't her only mark. She was playing you and she was playing her father. She got knocked up by some other guy and needed a rich idiot to pin it on. She was using that parasite in her stomach to trap you, force a quick wedding, and orchestrate a hostile takeover of Apex Holdings. But she didn't realize her flawless plan was going to blow up in her face because she underestimated the stupid housewife. This truth was 1,000,000 times more agonizing than losing the money or the company. It was a direct, lethal strike to his ego. He wasn't just conned. He was made into a spectacular, historic fool, a disposable pawn in a 2-0, something socialites scam. He threw away a loyal wife who literally built his empire, just so he could be a cuckold raising another man's child. What could possibly hurt more? Ryan's knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the floor. He didn't fake cry this time. He let out a raw, guttural wail, the sound of a man whose soul had just been snapped in half. He lost absolutely everything in the most pathetic, degrading way imaginable. Every secret was out in the light. No shadows left to hide in. The play had reached its tragic, definitive end for the villains. Following that apocalyptic shareholder meeting, Ryan's family experienced a freefall from the stratosphere directly into the gutter. Exactly 24 hours later, just as I promised, they were forcibly evicted from the Greenwich estate. A team of federal marshals and my private security firm oversaw the eviction. They were allowed to pack exactly 3 suitcases of generic clothing. Everything else, the bespoke furniture, the Rolexes, the Birkin bags, the art was seized and tagged for auction to recoup the embezzled funds. Overnight, they went from being elite socialites barking orders at maids to homeless vagrants standing on a sidewalk in Connecticut with rolling luggage. With the tiny bit of cash Ryan had hidden away, he managed to secure a lease on a cramped, moldy, roach-infested one-bedroom apartment deep in a dangerous neighborhood in the Bronx. a 400 square foot concrete box with peeling paint, busted radiators, and filthy linoleum floors. This became the new castle for three people who used to complain if their champagne wasn't chilled exactly to 45 degrees. The shock of poverty broke them completely. The following weeks turned into an endless cycle of vicious infighting, screaming matches, and blame. They were no longer a family. They were three rabid dogs locked in a cage. Barbara, having recovered from her fainting spell, was no longer a haughty matriarch. She spent her days crying and screaming, blaming her kids. "This is all your fault. You stupid idiot. Ryan, you let some tramp play you like a fiddle. And you, Sarah, you spoiled, useless brat. You blew all the money. You ruined our lives." Sarah, stripped of her designer armor and trust fund, snapped back viciously. "Who are you blaming? Weren't you the greediest one of all? Weren't you the one whispering in Ryan's ear to dump Kate for the billionaire's daughter? You bled the company dry. Now we're in the ghetto and it's your fault." Ryan, the former CEO, just sat in the corner, drowning himself in cheap vodka. He gave up entirely. The humiliation and betrayal broke his mind. Every time he got drunk, he would smash the cheap IKEA furniture, scream my name and Chloe's name, and then verbally abuse his mother and sister, calling them blood-sucking leeches who destroyed him. The tiny apartment echoed with violence and shattered glass daily. The neighbors despised them. To avoid starving to death, Barbara and Sarah, two women who hadn't worked a day in their lives, were forced to find minimum wage labor. Barbara got a job scrubbing pots in the sweltering kitchen of a greasy diner in Queens. Her hands, once soft and manicured, became blistered, scarred, and covered in grease burns. Sarah found work in a commercial laundry facility, standing on her feet for 12 hours a day, pulling wet sheets out of industrial machines, making barely enough to cover subway fare, let alone designer lip gloss. The crushing exhaustion made them bitter and hollow. They began to drown in regret, especially Barbara. On long, freezing nights, lying on a lumpy mattress, listening to rats scurrying in the walls, she thought of me. She remembered the massive Thanksgiving dinners I cooked. She remembered the immaculate, beautiful house I maintained. She remembered my patience, my class, my quiet financial brilliance. She finally realized that with her own two hands, she had chased away a daughter-in-law who was worth her weight in solid gold, a literal human ATM. She traded a diamond for a piece of broken glass, and the bill had finally come due. But her regret was useless. It couldn't change the brutal hell she was living in. They planted the seeds, and now they were choking on the harvest. While Ryan's family drowned in the swamp of their own making, my life began an explosive new chapter. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, I took full control. I officially assumed the title of CEO and chairman of Apex Holdings. I kept the name Apex, not out of sentimentality for Ryan, but as a permanent reminder to never forget my past, and out of respect for my late father-in-law's original vision. My first order of business was a corporate bloodbath. I fired every single sycophant, yes man, and executive who helped cover up the embezzlement, starting with the CFO, who was handed over to the authorities. I promoted the brilliant, quiet grinders who had been ignored by Ryan's toxic boys club. Aaron, my fiercely loyal assistant, was promoted to chief operating officer, becoming my right hand. Under my command, Apex Holdings experienced a massive renaissance. I killed the fraudulent projects and wiped the toxic debt off the books. I pivoted the company to focus on sustainable, high-yield developments, rebuilding our reputation on Wall Street. Victor Sterling, seeing my ruthless efficiency and ethical cleanup, didn't just reconsider pulling his money, he doubled down. Pinnacle Group invested heavily, becoming our strongest strategic partner. He publicly stated he only trusted a leader who possessed both apex intelligence and a moral compass. The company stabilized and skyrocketed. I became a titan in the Manhattan business world, a young, brilliant, terrifyingly competent female CEO. Forbes and the Wall Street Journal wrote features on me. My story became a legend, an inspiration to women across the country. I was no longer a shadow. I was the sun. I bought a stunning new penthouse overlooking Central Park, designed exactly how I wanted it. I traveled, I mentored, I lived fiercely. I learned that a woman's power is never derived from a man. True happiness comes from absolute independence, self-worth, and a titanium spine. Meanwhile, Ryan's tragedy hit its final act. After being evicted, His alcoholism cost him his meager construction job. He ran out of money entirely. To make matters worse, violent loan sharks came looking for a massive underground gambling debt he had kept hidden from me. With no money to pay, they beat him into a coma and left him in an alley. When he woke up, he was permanently hobbled. The former master of the universe was now a broken, filthy day laborer. Karma is a slow train, but it never misses its stop. But the universe wasn't done with him. The SEC and the FBI had concluded their investigation into the massive corporate fraud at Apex Holdings. Despite my team's best efforts to settle the fines, Ryan's personal signature was on millions of dollars of fraudulent wires. With the mountain of evidence I had handed over to federal prosecutors, a federal judge signed a warrant. Ryan was arrested by the FBI at 6 a.m. in his rat-infested apartment for wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities fraud. It was pouring rain the day they perp-walked him out in handcuffs. A fitting weather for a man who drowned his own life. Nobody came to his arraignment. Nobody paid his bail. His mother and sister, utterly broken and terrified of being indicted themselves, scraped together bus fare and fled to a decaying Rust Belt town in Ohio to hide. Ryan was left entirely alone in a federal holding cell, facing the absolute weight of his crimes. Months later, right before his criminal trial, I received a letter. It was written on cheap, lined jail paper, postmarked from the Metropolitan Correctional Center. There were no excuses in the letter, no begging. He wrote about his profound, soul-crushing regret. He wrote that his time in that concrete box were the most lucid days of his life. He finally understood that the greatest thing he lost wasn't the millions, or the penthouse, or the title, it was me. He didn't ask for forgiveness, because he knew he didn't deserve it. He only asked for one final favor, a 5-minute visit before he was shipped off to federal prison. I debated it. Part of me wanted to let him rot, but another part of me needed to close the loop. I needed to bury this ghost once and for all. I took a black car to the federal lockup. We sat across from each other in the visitation room, separated by thick, bulletproof plexiglass. Ryan looked like a skeleton. He had aged 20 years. His hair was thinning and entirely gray. His eyes, once arrogant and sharp, were sunken pits of despair. He picked up the phone. "Thank you for coming," he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves. We barely spoke. There was nothing left to say. The anger, the love, the hate. It had all evaporated into the sterile prison air. Before the guard tapped the glass to signal time was up, I slid a manila folder through the slot under the glass. "These are the final divorce decrees," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Drafted by my lawyers this time. I've already signed." "Sign them, Ryan. Free both of us." Ryan took the papers with a trembling hand. His bony finger traced my signature. He looked up at me, and a single, agonizing tear rolled down his gaunt cheek. "I'm sorry, and thank you for everything." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. I stood up and walked out. I didn't look back a single time. When I walked out the heavy steel doors of the prison, the bright, warm afternoon sun washed over me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of absolute freedom and new beginnings. The past was dead and buried behind those concrete walls. My future was a wide, limitless blue sky. Years later, Ryan was released from federal prison early for good behavior. He didn't return to New York. Rumor had it he moved to a desolate logging town in the Pacific Northwest, living quietly as a manual laborer, a ghost of a man. Barbara and Sarah never recovered. They lived out their days in a dilapidated trailer park in Ohio, bitter, isolated, and forgotten by the world. It was the only ending they deserved. As for me, I built a beautiful new life. Aaron, my fiercely loyal COO who stood by my side through the corporate war, eventually became my husband. Our love wasn't a flashy, toxic spectacle. It was a partnership forged in fire, built on absolute trust, mutual respect, and shared ambition. Together, we scaled Apex Holdings into a global powerhouse. We built a warm, loving home with 2 brilliant, beautiful children. My revenge story ended, but my life story was just hitting its stride. I learned the most expensive lesson a woman can learn. A woman's true value isn't measured by how much she sacrifices for a man. It is measured by how fiercely she rises from the ashes, how ruthlessly she cuts out the cancer in her life, and how brilliantly she builds her own kingdom.